Good morning. You're listening to WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina, at 103.7 on the dial. This is the BLAINESWORLD Show, heard each Wednesday at 9 a.m., and you can also watch us on WPVM's Facebook page. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina, and each week we focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Todd Williams. And Todd Williams is the Buncombe County District Attorney. Welcome aboard, Todd.
Hey, Blaine, thanks so much for asking me to come on and talk about the work of the DA's office.
Okay, well, it's my pleasure, Todd. And you can also, by the way, wave to all your fans and friends in Facebook world. So if you're watching, Todd, this is exciting. And since it's the first time you've been on Facebook Live. Todd is a career public defender who serves as your elected district attorney in Buncombe County. He was elected to the office in Buncombe County DA in 2014, and he has brought many reforms to our local justice system. Todd is a lifelong North Carolina resident, lives in Asheville with his wife, a trauma-informed mental health therapist, and family. And Todd, the question I always ask first when I have somebody on the air is, you grew up where?
I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, then moved over a couple counties to Alamance County and graduated in Alamance County. Elon College was the town name at that time. It's since changed its name to Elon, E-L-O-N. And then I went to UNC Chapel Hill and graduated down there with an English degree. So I'm a Tar Heel born and bred, as they say.
Now, when you were going to school, did you always know you wanted to become a district attorney?
I never anticipated becoming a district attorney. In fact, so that's a very interesting way to set this interview up because it has been a long and winding process to get to this office, which was quite unexpected.
Well, so what got you to this office?
Yeah, I I already said English major. That's the first mistake. It was actually the greatest blessing being an English major because I read fantastic literature. I think Shakespeare is has been sent from another planet, another alien species or something. He's so absolutely brilliant. Big fan of Shakespeare. But when you graduate college with an English degree, you got to figure things out thereafter. So what I did for a while is I was a English as a second language teacher and adult basic skills teacher in textile factories in Alamance County. And I thought, maybe I'd go to graduate school in English and continue on the academic track. But I really wanted to have, I guess, more productive use of whatever talents I may have, at that juncture. And I came in contact with a program called Literacy for the Homeless.
Okay.
In Alamance County. It's run through the community college. And really what that program was is, there were some classes on adult basic skills and reading and whatnot. But folks came into this class and they needed help, completing like job applications and like, life skills type stuff. And the folks that I worked with coordinated these folks with quite often, basically the Pisgah Legal Services of Central North Carolina. It was North State Legal Services. And I got to know a lawyer there, and I was impressed with the lawyer's commitment and integrity and all the rest of it. And I thought, lawyers don't necessarily have to be the kind of lawyers that are stigmatized or stereotyped, in terms of, ambulances and lawyers and all that kind of thing. And so I decided, maybe, with the English degree, a lot of English degree holders end up in law school. Maybe that is appropriate for me. And so it was a little bit of a path. It took 2 or 3 years for me to get to law school. But when I went, I really went in the hope of basically going into labor employment law or criminal defense. And I ended up being a public defender for 13 to 14 years, and then a capital defender for 2 more. And then in 2014, not to get in the weeds too much, but in 2014, there was some history here in Buncombe County where the North Carolina Innocence Commission came up here, held hearings, and found that 2 men were wrongfully convicted, that the DA had withheld evidence, that they had taken long terms in prison. And, the justice system just simply wasn't working here. All right. And I had experienced that as a public defender. I had represented people who had stolen a $12 pair of shoes at Walmart, taken it back to the exchange counter, gotten cash back, basically shoplifted shoes and brought it back, got cash in exchange. It's called a false pretense. And then filled
Right.
their tank with gas and drove off, got arrested. They had bad records and spent, 12 to 15 years in prison after an habitual felon enhancement was laid on them. It's like 12 to 15 years is certainly appropriate for violent crime, but not for this kind of, crimes of poverty and opportunity that don't involve victimization. So we had the wrongful convictions. We had on a per capita basis, one of the highest rates of, conviction with folks sitting on death row in North Carolina out of here. I threw my hat in the ring, and I ended up defeating the incumbent in 2014 with about 70% of the primary vote. And I knocked on a lot of doors, and I knocked on Blaine Greenfield's door, per se, and your answer was, "You're running against so and so. You got my vote." It's like most people didn't even want to know my name. They just wanted to vote against the DA who was there.
Well, it's funny you say that, Todd, because
Because
ordinarily,
I want to say that the reputation of the DA's office was at a very low ebb.
because what's funny you say that, because ordinarily you don't think about the DA too much, and it like even as you're talking about it, that, and we were talking off the air, you talk about presidential and congressional and Senate races, all that stuff. But the DA, people, it's just not number one on people's radar screen. So what's interesting also, I think what you just said, is the fact that you were saying certain people didn't like, what's happening out of the Buncombe County DA's office, but unfortunately, some people do like it, in terms of, you say convictions and people on death row, and it's incredible what's happened in society. Some people say that's the greatest thing, since cream cheese. We should put more people in jail and longer period of time. So it's, I guess, a constant dichotomy you have to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. Here within the office, we try to thread the needle, if you
Right,
you
right.
will, so that we can ascertain, what's the community's broad-based community sentiment about what justice is, and what we basically as DAs, we're advocates in front of the court. The DA doesn't invest. We don't. The DA doesn't investigate. We don't arrest. We don't sentence. We don't. We don't put bonds on people and hold them in custody. We don't do any of those things. But we advocate for certain outcomes and certain results in the court system, and we do have discretion to, like in regard to the shoe example that I gave, the Walmart false pretense that's laid on with the habitual felon enhancement. We don't have to sometimes advocate for certain outcomes, right? But we are advocates in the court system. And the broad-based philosophy that I think that we have here in Buncombe County, I think, my office is trying to respond to community sentiment, is we want violent crime addressed. I think that's a universal, right? And we want to treat and address mental health and substance abuse and those kinds of crimes differently. We want to bring folks in from outside of the courthouse to try to divert and address people's issues so that they're back to being productive members of our community. There's no point in sending someone who steals $12 or $14 in goods and services then to go off to prison for 10 to 15 years at $50,000 a year to the taxpayer. I think we're on a hamster wheel of not addressing the core problems in our society, in our community. So I think that's what motivated me to run in 2014 and to bring some change to this, to what we advocate for in the court system.
Well, you raise a good point, Todd, because I'm also thinking as you speak about the situation that Asheville and Buncombe County is now even facing with the homeless, and the fact that unfortunately there are a lot of homeless people out there, and then unfortunately they're finding some place to go. They have to, and it's a constant battle. That what was it? They were going to make a hotel, and they're still talking about making a hotel for the homeless. And conceptually, you think that sounds like a good idea to address the problem. But then there are a whole bunch of people who don't want it, in my backyard, so to speak. And so it's a constant, battle as to what issues to address and how to address them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that community, the unhoused community, if you
Right.
will, um, they're certainly at risk. They're at risk of so many, they're highly likely to be victims of crime themselves. They're highly likely to have mental health and substance abuse issues that they need assistance with. They're highly they're probably at greater risk of suffering some grave consequence like an overdose or what have you. Um, that being said, when grave events do occur, there should be a criminal response. But when we're talking about you know, hey, say it's Blaine Greenfield. Blaine Greenfield, he's standing down there on the corner again. I told him not to stand in front of my store. Okay, is there a criminal justice response to that? Number one, every person, whether they're unhoused or they're Blaine Greenfield or Todd Williams, we have constitutional rights, right? You have to have probable cause to arrest. All these things are in place, right? If someone has, uh, you know, something in their tent, well, the police need to have some kind of probable cause to get into that tent. You can't just, right? You just can't, point someone out and then have the cops come and throw them in jail or move them or banish them from the community. So I mean, in order to get to some kind of resolution of this problem, we need to have a community discussion. It can't just be a criminal justice discussion. So the Ramada Inn, the solution in terms of a low barrier housing option, that's something the city council needs to look at. Um, you know, uh, People have complained about public urination and other nuisance crimes like that. Do we want more and better bathrooms downtown? Infrastructure questions, transportation questions. I don't know, but I mean, criminal justice is not always the answer. And I think, as a community and as a culture, I think we're looking more and more at the criminal justice system to provide treatment and resources to folks who are vulnerable and aren't committing violent acts or victimizing people with property crime and what have you. Those are very serious too. But you can't criminalize existence.
Well, let's go back to the basic question then, Todd. So if somebody asks you, this is like in a school setting, you speak to a group of sixth graders, you speak to a group of college students. They ask you, okay, Todd, so what does a district attorney do? So you're a district attorney, it's an elected position, you have an office of X number of people working with you. And by the way, how many people are in your office?
Yeah, we
About?
got, including me, we have 18 attorneys and support staff that brings us up to about 38.
Okay, so what do all these people do?
Okay, well, my attorneys are in court in front of judges and they're advocating and handling cases. We handle everything in the courthouse from speeding tickets all the way up to first degree murder. Parking tickets, we don't handle that. Go to the city for that. But there are, it's an interesting caseload because at the low end of it, we have a vast number of traffic tickets. When we have 1 week a month where we handle lots of traffic tickets. Before COVID, we might have 3,000 or 4,000 people come down here with various tickets. So that there's a lot of case processing, just case by case. But those cases take about maybe a minute and a half to process, right? Very quick. Say Blaine Greenfield comes down to the courthouse with a 64 and a 59 speeding ticket, we might dismiss that,
I've
or we
been
might,
there.
yeah, might give you a $10 fine, or and you might pay it, or you might say, hey, I don't want that. Set it for another court date, and I want to talk to the judge. We do all those things. We do all those things very quickly. Now, over the past 10 years or so, on the high end of it, in terms of murder, rape, and robbery, those kinds of cases that we handle, those cases aren't handled very quickly. They're very, very slow to process. They if they don't result in a guilty plea, they have to be tried in front of a jury of 12 folks here in Buncombe County. And my folks are advocating to jurors and in front of judges for certain outcomes. And in those cases, they're very slow, in part because I just want to, here's the one exhibit I have. Everybody has these now. And,
Right.
I think my phone has 128 gigabytes or 64 or something. Anyway, that's a colossal amount of data. And just about every case that's high on that punishment classification uh, is very data intensive. So not only are those cases harder because they have to be argued and presented to a jury, but the data, the content that we have to deal with has mushroomed in the last 10 to 20 years.
I thought you were going to say something else too. It's not only has data mushroomed, but also the whole idea of people having the cell phones and the video has made the whole job has changed, I imagine. For the good, for good or bad, what do you think? Everybody has a
Well,
video.
I do think that there's a implicit bias that people hold. A lot of times people want to see because police wear body cam. You
Right.
know, there's body cam. There's ring cameras on so many homes. There's surveillance footage. People have the cell phones. People want to see it on film, and if I think it's becoming. This is just sort of seat of the pants in response to your. I feel like if we have a case where it's not almost on video or it's not explicitly demonstrated on a big screen in the courtroom, people have additional difficulties listening to testimony from witnesses these days and finding guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That's just sort of um, a feeling that I have. Um, I think that's an interesting observation that you've made because
It's
we live
interesting.
so much and we live so much on these devices.
It's interesting, Todd. When I think I told you off there, I used to work for the Mercer County court system in New Jersey, and they would not initially allow people to bring in, cameras or video. It wasn't allowed, and all of a sudden, everything broke, and it certainly changed, I guess, in some respects, maybe for the better, because certain things. Well, I don't know. Can you prove if you see something on video or the same kind of thing that there are different angles, different interpretations? It's not as what's upsetting, I think, to me as a layperson, maybe you also in the system, is that people think it proves you can prove everything so easily, and it's not always so easy to prove everything, even though you may think it is. And
Yeah, well, the first precept of the justice system is you're innocent until proven guilty, right? And that's something that we always need to come back to when we're talking about the justice system. Innocent until proven guilty. We have to have evidence to prosecute a case. And I want to back up to what does a DA do? Um, I've done presentations or talks at high school and whatnot. And sometimes I just ask questions. I said, does it hands up? Does a DA do this or does a DA do that? Does a DA arrest? Does a DA investigate? Does a DA put you in jail? Does a DA put you under a bond? Can a DA dismiss a case for any reason or no reason? And it's interesting to see sometimes people are like, well, wait a second. We don't arrest, we don't investigate, we don't sentence, we don't put people in jail, right? But we can, in our advocacy capacity, we can dismiss, a case for any reason or no reason in the interest of justice if we wanted to. And just we have to explain it back to the Blaine Greenfields of the world and your listeners as to why we do those things. Our goal is to do justice. That's what we really try to do, right? If Blaine Greenfield has a very clean driving record, and you've got a speeding ticket or a stop sign violation, you come down to the courthouse. Hey, I didn't see the stop sign. It was the bush had grown over it. I'm sorry. We're probably in about 10 seconds going to look at your record and find that it's clean and dismiss it, right? But if it's the third stop sign violation that you've had in that same community in the last 18 months, it's different. The goal is not to put the screws to everybody that comes to the courthouse. It's to do justice and to modify behavior in the appropriate way.
quick question: should people, when they get a ticket, since you raised the issue, uh, should they go and quote fight it or go to court to challenge it or appeal it? What you thinking?
Well, now that's one that it's not my place to give that kind of
Okay,
legal Yeah.
Well, that's right.
Everybody's
So
every
wait,
case.
yeah.
Yeah, every case is personal and specific to the folks who's been charged with crime, and as district attorney, it's again, it's our obligation to do justice and to be fair. But sometimes an attorney will be very valuable to to the individual who's charged.
And I think he gave good advice there, not only in terms of contacting conceivably an attorney, but leaving up to the person himself or herself. So it's not up to even the attorney. They have to make a decision. I guess if they feel they were wrongfully stopped or given the ticket, then by all means fight it. But that's
Yeah.
not
And what I just said applies to all my staff. So, if you came, if it's a little stop sign violation and you came down to the courthouse and said, hey, what do you recommend that I do? My assistants should be saying, I can't give you that advice. What I'll do is, if it's a speeding ticket, I'll reduce the speed from 15 over to under 10. So, that might help you with your insurance. Would you like to do that? Well, I don't know. Maybe I want to talk to a lawyer. Can you give me another date? And that kind of, can you give me another date so I can think about it? By and large, we're going to, again, our obligation is to be fair and do justice. We're going to give you another date so you can talk to someone about that.
By the way, I have to back up on something you said, and you were giving an example. It was a good example, but I think I heard you say something about a $10 ticket. And correct me if I'm wrong, that there aren't too many $10 tickets anymore.
Well, actually, most speeding tickets are $10 tickets.
We'll
All
talk
right.
about
The problem is
right,
you got to read the fine print. These lawyers is the court costs are about $180.
right.
All right. So the fine is $10, but it's only 5% of the fees that you're paying.
Yeah, because yeah, last time exactly, I got last time. It's been a long time, but I went to court and I got a speeding ticket, and yeah, it said $10, no problem, or whatever it was. But then I had to go to a Mac machine or something to get the money or something. It was just it kind of threw me a little bit. And we can get off speeding for a second, Todd. Let's start to talk about some of the other things you guys do too. So
Yeah.
you explain a little bit about what the DA does, but also you told me off the air, and I know a little bit about this too. There are some other offices that come out under your jurisdiction, which I think the community should know about. And I mentioned, especially with children, for example, talk about.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay. So I wanted to, when I came in, again, it was never my career goal to be district attorney, but when I came in, I did have a number of things I wanted to achieve as DA. All right. There was a number of things that I felt like we could do better. Like we just talked about homelessness. I think we need a multidisciplinary and, kind of like a community-wide discussion on how we addressed homelessness. Well, we needed that also in the family justice, in the context of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and also children. Children are so vulnerable. There's competency issues in regard to their ability to testify and recollect and their ability to put together histories, and narratives the way adults do. That police quite often aren't trained to deal with these victims. Same thing with family justice, with domestic violence. Trauma-informed services are extremely important. Offering a place where survivors can come and know that they're going to be safe, they're going to be treated appropriately, and not going to be, hey, did you ask for this to happen? They're not going to get that kind of response. We brought all those things into the court system. So I really want to give a shout out to the folks at Child Advocacy Center, who we were able to lift that off the ground in 2016, I believe, and the Family Justice Center. And concurrently in development with those agencies, we in partnership with Buncombe County, we created the Justice Resource Center, which is located at the top of the courthouse in what used to be the Buncombe County Jail. All right, and so why that's significant is it's now a place where if you're charged with a low level drug crime or something like that, you're a first offender, you can go participate in a program and complete it in the Justice Resource Center. If it's a substance abuse issue, you might be coordinated with a peer support counselor. for about 6 to 9 months. You do well in that. We address your whatever issue it was, and your case is dismissed, right? Again, the answer isn't jail. The answer isn't prison. The answer isn't always probation and a criminal conviction that then, you have to check a box on an application or somebody does a criminal record. You're kind of, you're making progress on your personal issues, but you're being held back by the justice system because you had to come to court and plead your felony down to a misdemeanor. No, what we've opted to do here in this community, and certainly, here in the DA's office, in coordination with our partners in the community, we've elected to provide some additional ways to rectify these problems of the folks that are justice involved.
So go back to the Child Advocacy Center. So what exactly
Yes.
does that do?
Child Advocacy Center it's basically a group of trained professionals who know a great wealth of information about childhood trauma, and they've been trained on how to interview children. They're called forensic interview techniques with kids. They've been trained how to assess a child's competency to testify and to give information, all through non-leading questions. And the idea is to get as much information out of the child in as thorough and clinical fashion as possible. That is, it's not like, the bright light bulb in the face, whatever. I mean, obviously that's more for the suspect, but it's in a very child-friendly environment. And the goal is in the past, what happened was you would have the child would maybe give a statement to a doctor, give a statement to the police officer, then give a statement to Department of Social Services, and then maybe to the DA's office, right? So the goal of the Child Advocacy Center is to, number one, have a trained professional that addresses all those investigatorial issues globally, and if need be, you've got facilities so that it's the forensic interviewer together with police, DA, social services, medical, all in the background to ask as many questions as possible. What happened to the child in that forensic appropriate setting, so that we get just one interview. See, what happens with kids is that if they have to give the same narrative 3 or 4 different times, they are sometimes kids. They remember this one day, they remember it differently. Even adults do that.
I was just going to say that, Todd. Exactly, yeah.
And so what happens is a defense attorney is, Blaine Greenfield, on, December 27th, you said this, but you left that out, right?
Right.
And so the jurors are left thinking, well, he seemed to change his story from one interview to the next. It makes these cases very hard to prosecute. So the purpose of the Child Advocacy Center, and I thank you for sticking on this, is to ensure that we have the very best services and practices to put kids on a healing path and to get justice for folks that do horrible, that have been charged with doing terrible things to children.
Last question on that. Is there any age where it's too young for a child to be considered in testimony? I've always wondered about that.
Yeah, well, that's flexible. There's no bright line, but I think most would say that it's virtually impossible under around 5 or 4.
And what you're saying, Todd, just as a final thought, reminds me so much of a similar problem in the medical industry, which has always amazed me. That I remember the story once. My mother, she went in, she was with my father, and she got sick, and she was interviewed by like 5 different people at 1 o'clock in the morning, and she forgot what she was saying. It was overkill. And so what I think you guys have done, which I think is great, is trying to consolidate the process so you don't have to keep doing it 5 different times. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Todd, lastly, if folks want to get in touch with the district attorney's office, questions, public presentations, whatever reason, best bet is to do what?
Can I back up and just say,
Sure.
The Mountain Child Advocacy Center, they really need, they can do great work with assistance donations from folks who who might be concerned about child abuse in our community. So I just want to Mountain Child Advocacy Center. You can Google that and you can get to their website and learn about what the Child Advocacy Center does. The best source of information for what the DA's office does
Right.
is, frankly, my Twitter. It's Buncombe Buncombe Co DA at Buncombe Co DA. That's where I put out press releases. That's where you can see what we do. And then we have buncomeda.org. It's a website. And if you want to, submit, so you watch this and you want to ask a question about what I said on Blaine Greenfield show, there's a community comments or community input button on buncomeda.org where you can submit comment and it'll come to me.
Okay, great. Anyway, Todd, I'd like to thank you for being my guest this first half hour on the Blaine's World Show. And it's been too long since we had you, but hopefully we'll bump into each other sometime in the near future, my friend.
Well, it's amazing how fast time goes by. Thank you so much.
Okay, Todd, be well. Speak to you soon. Have a great New Year. Okay.
You too. Thank you,
Blaine.
Blaine.
We're going to put Todd in the waiting room, and we're going to bring in my second guest. And as she works her way in, there she is. Missy, I'll be with you in 1 second. I just want to mention to folks that you're listening to WPVM and WPM 103.7 on the radio and also on Facebook. WPVM's mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides the medium for artists, businesses, community leaders, and nonprofits to share their voice on the radio. Listeners are invited to help support WPVM's efforts by making a tax-deductible contribution. They can do so by going to the website, WPVMFM.org, and looking at the donate option on the upper right-hand side. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my second guest in today's show, and she is Missy Bell. And Missy Bell is a director, writer, Mouse House Productions. Welcome aboard, Missy.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, and you can wave to all your friends on Facebook world. So if you're watching, you see Missy. And Missy Bell is a film director in Asheville, North Carolina. She's originally from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and got her started in the arts via musical theater in high school. Since she has found directing and has been a stage director for over 20 years, the past 3 years she has moved her focus to film and several award-winning short films under the belt. And reading about you, Missy, reminds me a little bit of the movie I just saw, West Side Story. I'm thinking that she won, Maria was acting in high school, and all of a sudden she's in a major movie. This could have been you, So talk about it. So you started out as an actor in high school or public school. When did you start acting?
So I was always kind of a performer. My dad is actually a pastor. And so being on stage was sort of normal for me, and being in front of people. I played Mary in the Nativity 11 times. But but in high school is where I started to get serious about acting. I auditioned for my school's musical. It was A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And had a really amazing experience and just fell in love with being on stage and, the professionalism that my director showed me, and the community that I found in theater was, I felt like I finally, after a very long time, had a place to belong as a person.
Now, do you remember your very first show?
Man, I think my very first show ever was probably a church play. I played Little Red Riding Hood in a church, a short church play that was for a Mother's Day banquet. And yeah, go ahead.
I have an idea for you here, especially given your film background, is that I want to do a fundraiser for some theater in Asheville. I tell this to everybody, and we'll get you involved in this too, but where everybody would do their very first production, so that, when you were a kid, because you did that production as Red Riding Hood. Is there a record of that somewhere?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think
so. On video?
Maybe.
No, but
I think probably.
But wouldn't that be cool to show your kids or something, that this is Mom as a kid. So you graduated from Red Riding Hood then, you went to high school. Did you study theater in college?
I did not. So I majored in English, just like your previous guest. Yeah. I was an English education major. I did a lot of theater in college, and that is where I kind of got my start as a director. I had an acting professor tell me that she thought I would be great at directing and to kind of give it a try. And so I did. I think I was 19 when I directed my first play.
What, in college?
Yeah.
Oh, how cool is that? Well, let me ask you a question. I always wonder when I speak to actors. So you've done both ends. You've acted, you've now directed, you're now directing films. Do you have a preference, acting or directing?
My preference is directing.
Is it?
Yeah, that I would consider that my passion, but I think acting is still really like my first love. It's very comfortable for me. It feels like being on stage as an actor feels like putting on like a really nice old jacket that just fits really well, you know. But directing is just, I feel very passionate about orchestrating a production as a director. It's very, very satisfying for me in a way that acting is not.
See, the truth comes out. I'll ask a lot of actors and directors that question, and almost everybody answers the same way you did. You know, they prefer they've acted it, directed. But the truth comes out, Missy. You also don't have to remember the lines, but we won't talk about that. You know, but there's a lot of people say they have to remember all the lines or know it as a director, and I've seen you probably have too, where sometimes a director has to come in when somebody doesn't show or they wind up on stage. So you started directing at the age of 19. Talk about how you then got into films. So I know you've been doing some acting in the Asheville area. What brought you into films?
So I was directing a production of Romeo and Juliet with at Anam Theater Company with all teenagers in all the roles intentionally. And I was rehearsing that at the Actors Center of Asheville, where Kevin Murphy
Oh, sure.
teaches film acting. And he was kind of like hanging out in the background watching me. And he, when I took a break, he came out and he said, "Hey, I think you might be, are you an actor also?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I think you would be great on film. Why don't you should come out and, do an interview with me and try a class." And I was very kind of against it. Like, oh no, I stage only, and live performance is everything, but I did give it a try. I worked with an agent for several years after I learned kind of the basics from Murph. And yeah, I worked in film, did several short independent films and a couple feature films, several commercials. And then I took a class at the Asheville School of Film with Brad Hoover. And I thought I might want to get into like cinematography. And I started working with Brad. And by the end of the class, I was directing the film for the class. And he told me that, he thought I was really talented as a film director, that my skills really translated, and that I should really think about focusing on and pursuing that. And so this year, I dropped my acting agent. It's kind of a weird backward thing to hear an actor say, but I dropped my agent and I started focusing exclusively on film directing.
And you were telling me off the air, so you've now directed a bunch of stuff, mostly of a short nature, is that correct?
Yes.
So talk about what you've directed and kind of what that role was about.
Sure. So the first film I directed is called Sync, and it was for the Asheville School of Film. It was a student film, and it's about kind of like my own personal experiences as a mom who suffers from mental illness. I have bipolar disorder, and I wrote this short film about a mom who is trying to raise her son alone, and she goes off of her medication, and it's kind of about how she and the son are working sort of in tandem, and what does unconditional love look like, and what is how do we handle mental illness, as a mother, as a child, and sort of that dynamic was the first film I ever directed. I've directed several films since then.
Hold on that film. That's kind of an interesting story. So
Sure.
how long was that film?
That film is about 14 minutes.
Okay, I mean, it just sounds kind of an interesting thing. And when you put the film together, you did everything from start to scratch, I guess. Did you write it? Did you, it was your idea. Did you put it together also?
So I did write it and I did direct it. And then Brad, who runs the Asheville School of Film, he shot it. He was the director of photography, and he also did the editing on that film. But the actors in that film, one was my oldest child, Jonah, played the son, and then the lead in that film was Molly Graves,
Oh,
who
amazing. I know Molly. Yeah.
she's actually in the film I'm working on right now.
Right.
She played the lead in Sync, and she was phenomenal.
No, it's just a very powerful actor. I've seen her on stage. I haven't seen her in film.
Yeah.
So that film, so you shot it. So what happened to that film after it was shot?
So I sent it to some festivals. I was really just learning about how to promote my own work and kind of get it out there. And festivals actually cost money. So and I was learning, just this huge learning curve of what to even do. It ended up being in a couple of festivals. One of them was the Courage Film Festival in Berlin, Germany, which was really an honor. It's all about courageous people and dealing with mental illness. So that was cool. And it then was used at Warren Wilson College. Their psychology department is actually using that film now to talk about medication and mental illness. And that film is also on my Vimeo page.
Okay, well, I was just going to ask you, so because now you have me interested in it, if somebody wants to see this particular film, what do they do? They go to, how do they
So
find
it's at Vimeo.
Yeah.
Vimeo.com
Right.
/ Mouse House PRODS.
Mouse House PR.
ODS.
Okay, I'll have to catch it. Anxious to see it now. You got me interested. And talk a little bit about this so that now you have this film and people can actually see it, which is kind of cool, so they can see it anytime you want. How'd you get the name for the company, by the way?
So that's a really fun story. When I was born, I had super big ears and they stuck out. And my parents called me Mouse. They called me, so my name's Missy, my full name's Melissa, and they called me Miss Mouse. Like my whole life, they still call me that. And so because of that nickname, I went with Mouse House. Like my production company is named after mine.
You don't mind the nickname though, do you?
No, it's kind of great. It doesn't bother me.
Okay, really? That's really cool. So that's the name of your production company. So you make this first film. I guess you got the bug after making the first film?
Yeah, big time. I made another film after that called Eve, based on a story. Eamon Martin, who was an actor in Asheville for a while.
Sure, very talented. I haven't seen him. I used to love his stuff. I saw a couple things. I haven't seen too much of him lately.
So he moved to New York.
Is that it? Okay, very talented guy.
Yeah, so good. And he posted on Facebook that he got this weird phone call, like wrong number message from this woman. And it was about that the Eiffel Tower was on fire and that she knew who set it on fire. And so I asked Eamon, I was like, hey, I would love to make this into a film. Like if you pursued this phone call from this woman, and would that be okay with you if I did? And he said, yes, absolutely, go for it. And I cast him in the lead. And we shot that film. It's a short film too, but it's called Eve. And it is about him as this sort of like sad, bored bartender in Asheville. And he gets this phone call and then he chases down this story of this woman who knows about who set the Eiffel Tower on fire. So
how long was that film?
That film is about 17 minutes.
Okay. By the way, you're getting me interested in these films. I love film.
Yay!
And I love like Eamon. It's just such a, I've only seen him a couple of things, but he's such a talented actor. You can tell him I said so.
I will.
So that's really cool. So you started producing these short films, and so that's second or third one when you did. Keep going from there. I'm just fascinated by the films. They all sound interesting,
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. I did a couple of 48-hour film festivals.
I was going to the Asheville 48 Film Festival.
Yeah. Yes. I do that with a team called Colony 9 Productions. And that is managed and run creatively by a guy named Thomas Townsend, who is a partner of mine. And we did a film, a post-apocalyptic Western for the 48. with that. And then this year we did a sort of film noir thriller called Crimson Mercy, which isn't anywhere yet, but we're going to drop it on YouTube at some point. And Crimson Mercy was about a man who is chasing down this criminal who's like an angel of death criminal. So she is killing people who are already supposed to die in the hospital. And he's investigating this crime.
So it seems you like doing these light comedies. You know, I'm listening to your subject matter. By the way, remind me too, or off the air, you can help me make contact with the 48-hour film festival, because that seems like that'd be a fun show for me to do. You know,
Yeah,
intro
sure.
show. But I've always wondered. So that must be quite a task to put together a film in 48 hours, and you've done a bunch of them. Is that tough?
It is so tough. It is. And everyone, you know, you do it with people you really love, and
Yeah.
then you hate each other. Like for what, once it gets to like, you start Friday night and you end Saturday night or Sunday night, and Saturday you just hate everybody. Like Saturday night, you're never going to speak to them again. You're like,
So
everything's
you go straight
terrible.
through 48 hours?
Yeah. So, you generally kind of try to break up tasks so that people do get to sleep. But
Yeah.
on Friday, you pick like a genre, and everyone at the festival has a character with a profession, a prop, and a line that they all have to use. And then you pull out of a hat a genre. So, and then you have from Friday at like 7 p.m. till Sunday at 7 to write, produce, edit, score the whole film, and then they do show the festival films locally usually.
And how long are these films?
The rule is that it has to be less than 7 minutes.
Oh, so it's a really short film.
Yeah, so it has to be 7 minutes or less. If you go over 7, you're disqualified. So
Well, let me kind of use that to segue into one project I think you just have finished fundraising by the time the show will be on the air. But I guess I heard about it from one of your actors, Strother Stingley, and talk about
Yes.
that film.
So that film is called The Library at the End of the Universe. I also wrote that film, and it is about a girl named Mildred, and she lives inside a library, and that is the only thing that she thinks exists in the universe. She's been told this. Everyone inside the library believes this. And then her friend Philip tells her one day that some people inside the library don't believe that, and that they plan to leave the library. And he asks her to come with him. And so the whole film is about her having to wrestle with this decision of, do I stay in this safe, secure place, the only place that I know, or do I venture out into what might be certain death, possibly, in order to, you know, have a new perspective, grow as a person, get out. And so that is her decision. And that's what the film is about.
And what's the name of it?
It's called The Library at the End of the Universe.
Now, is this, again, another of your ideas that you came up with?
Yeah. So I wrote this. And I actually sent it to Brad, who at the Asheville
Right.
School of Film. He's kind of, we're colleagues now, but he's also a mentor of mine. And I sent it to him, you know, just like, I have this idea. What do you think of it? And he wrote back to me and was like, I want to shoot it for you and you have to make it. And I'm so excited and I love it. So that turned into, I thought, oh, we'll do this a weekend with a couple friends. It's now turned into the most major production I have done thus far. So.
And talk about that process, because again, that's how I guess heard about it maybe a month ago or so. I bumped into one of your actors and he was telling me about it. I said, this sounds really cool. Talk about it from like soup to nuts. So you come up with an idea and you think it's going to be a film and you want to make it. So then you bounce it off on your associate. And then what
Yeah.
happens? How does it then get from there to become a film?
Okay, so I had already written the screenplay when I pitched it to Brad. And so that would be the first, you know, portion, idea, screenplay. And then after that is getting together a crew of people and gathering finances in order to fund the film. And sometimes then you will also cast your actors at that time. Sometimes you wait until all the funds are raised. I cast before we had all of the funds, because I'm daring, I guess. And but after that, we work on, getting together every single person in the crew, working on storyboards. So every shot that you see in the film, there's a drawing that goes along with that, showing exactly every single thing we're going to do in the film, props lists, shot lists and schedules. I have a first assistant director who his whole job is really scheduling. And then on the day of the shoot, he makes sure that everybody's safe, that we're staying on schedule, we're getting breaks on time, that we're moving quickly. If you're familiar with more stage work, that's kind of like a stage manager, but a little bit more powerful. And then, so after all that pre-production work is all the planning, gathering props, and we did photo shoots for promotionals and all kinds of stuff. We shot a prequel to the film we hadn't shot yet, a prologue. And after doing all of that, then you shoot it. That's actually the shortest part. You shoot the film. That's a 4-day process for this film. And then after that is editing, composing the score. We're doing some animation for the credits. And then you show it to people.
And Missy, before we run out of time, I understand you have actually, you can show me was it the prequel for this or the preview of this?
So I'm calling it a prologue, but yes, I can.
Great.
And I'm going to share my screen with you. And the very beginning is me talking about why the film's important. And then it goes into a story, and you're going to recognize some of these actors. So I'm excited for you. So
great, thank you. We'll come back to you after we see this.
Awesome. Sharing screen. And share.
Gets going.
Got it?
Okay, yeah, we see the screen is being shared, it looks like, and did good. Okay, I think we're going to come to it in just a second. And for people listening, we're seeing a preview of a film that Missy's working on.
Hi, I'm Missy Bell, writer and director of The Library at the End of the Universe, the story of Mildred, a girl who spent her entire life thinking that the only thing in existence is the inside of a library. Then she's faced with a choice: venture outside the library and risk everything, or stay inside in safety but stagnation. During this time of global tension and crisis brought on by the pandemic, all of us have become essentially Mildred. Also brought on by the global pandemic has been a newfound attention to workers' rights. As a result of this, we want to make sure that everyone involved with our film on our cast and crew is paid for their work. That's where you come in. We can't do that alone. We also know that you want to invest your money in the most excellent of projects. This is why our cast and crew got together for a night and filmed for you a prologue to our film. This will give you some more of Mildred's backstory and also give you a chance to see exactly what our team can do. We know that once you've seen it, you will be excited to join our team by clicking the pledge button below. Thank you so much. Welcome to the team.
It's beautiful. You're beautiful. Where's my mom?
Your mother passed away.
She wasn't sick. Where's my mom?
find your mom?
My mom is dead.
So that's the end.
Okay, very cool. So this was use that film. I'm going to change the view here. So you use that film as to tell people about it and to help with the fundraising you did for the film.
Yes. Yeah, that was what we used it for. Yeah.
Okay. And what's really cool, I give you a lot of credit because I believe in what you said 100%. That yeah, actors, performers, directors, behind stage people, behind the scenes, they should get paid. You know, this is the common retort, Missy, you remember from your stage days. Well, you get exposure. No, you know, it's great exposure. Exposure doesn't pay bills, I guess, or even pay for production costs of a film. You know,
Right.
which is something. So talk about then what happened. So this film then is going to come out when?
So we're hoping it will come out in the spring of this year of 2022, March or April. But we will have a local premiere of the film when it's ready. But then it will be on the festival circuit for a year. So it won't be like super publicly available until after that year.
And so what do you hope happens then? That it'll be picked up by a festival and it's shown, or where does it go?
So the hope is, yeah, that many festivals will show it. And then the ultimate hope for this film is that someone, an investor, which how investors and producers and things like that see new work and new people they're interested in is through festivals. And so my hope for this film is that someone will see it, love the concept, and want to pick it up to make it into a series or even a feature film. So a series would be my ultimate hope for it. And then, but a feature film would also be amazing. I think that the world has a lot more story to tell than what we're going to see in a short film. So
you're seeing this as, and I can see it just from the preview, as being like a Netflix type thing or something else that over a series of maybe 5 or 6 years, you think, with 10
Yeah.
episodes each year?
yeah, either that or even like a mini series where it's like 8 episodes in a row. I think that would be amazing, just to kind of show, what is the library and what's really going on here. And all those questions aren't going to be answered in the short film. But there is a version of what you just saw. The director's cut of that actually has a scene that shows what happens to Mildred when she goes down into the basement with the librarian Strother plays. And so that is actually, you can see that on the campaign page, which is still available for updates. And on the campaign page, there's a section that says media. And under that tab, you can watch the director's cut, which has Strother and the basement scene where we find out what happened to Mildred and her mother and that sort of stuff.
Well, you kind of anticipated my next question. So folks want to find out more about, first of all, this particular production or about Missy Bell and some of the other stuff you do. What's the best bet?
So this particular production has all the updates. The film you just saw and the director's cut of that film is at bit.ly, so bit.ly/library at the end. That's so bit.ly/library at the end is the link to the campaign page. And then we also have an Instagram for library. It's at library at the end. And then my personal Instagram is at Missy Bell _arts, ARTS.
Do you also have a Facebook page?
Yeah, so there's a Facebook for me personally. There's a Facebook for Mouse House Productions, and there's a Facebook for the library at the end of the universe. And all of those are really easily searchable on Facebook.
Okay, do you have a website also?
Mouse House does. Mousehouse.productions is the whole website for Mouse House.
Okay. Wait, this sounds exciting stuff. You know, I think I told you I bumped into Strother, and he was so excited about it. He said, I had to speak to you. And so thank you very much for being my guest the second half hour on the BLAINESWORLD show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'd also like to thank Todd Williams for being my guest the first half hour, my producer, Amy Prisnosh, and I look forward to having you join me next Wednesday, 9 a.m. here on WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. Lina, you can also listen online at WPVMFM.org and watch us on WPVM's Facebook page. Missy, hopefully we'll bump into each other almost in live, in person at some point in time. Be well.
I think we will.
Okay, great.